Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts. I'm your host, Doug Peters. Today we're going to be talking about the Travis Roy Foundation, and I am honored to have two people I consider to be very dear friends. I have Lee Roy, who his title is Travis Roy's father, and he also is a doe bird hunter. And we also have Travis, who is the founder of the Travis Roy Foundation, author, artist, and I say that as a very accomplished artist he is. I've got some of his works. My mother cherishes the cards that you produced, along with being a former hockey player. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for taking time to be with us today.
It's great to be with you, Doug. I'm thrilled.
Always nice to talk with people on the West Coast.
Well, it's as Ed Peduto, who's another East Coast guy. He doesn't believe that anything but the East Coast time zone matters, and we're here to kind of disprove him a little bit today. But I want to thank you both very much for coming to talk with us today. We want to get into a discussion about the Travis Roy Foundation and what they're doing to try to eliminate spinal cord injuries with a cure for it. And it's something near and dear to my heart, the foundation is, and want to chat about that. But first, I want to touch a little bit with Lee, because Lee, you're the reason that I know your son as well as I do, as well as your family. You and I go back many years, and I'm going to share a little bit of a story. And the first time that you called up, you're with the Cumberland County Civic Center in Portland, Maine, I believe. And you called up and were looking to order some parts, and you got me on the phone, and I had never talked to you before. And by the end, it was, Dougie, I hope you have a great day. And it was like we were best friends. And it was like, I got off the phone and I was going, holy cow, this guy just is an awesome guy. I don't know if you recall that or not. The check is in the mail for you to remember that.
No, obviously I fooled another person, so that was good. But again, I go back further than that, because that's the 80s, and again, to let the audience know that I'm really old. I mean, I met Frank J. Zamboni Sr. when I first got in the business in 1972 and ordered our first Zamboni for the Portland Ice Arena in Portland, Maine. So, you're a latecomer, Doug, as far as being, that way. But at the same time, the friendship that I've had with you ever since the Civic Center has been, one that we both cherish. I know that. So, anyways, go ahead.
I do. It's your family has been awesome. I've been blessed to meet and spend a fair amount of time with your mother before she passed away just this year. And we'll talk a little bit more about her in a bit. But I do have a question for you, Lee, before we get into talking with Travis about the foundation and all his hard work with it. Do you think that your career in the ice rink industry is what drove Travis to become the hockey player he became?
Not really. He was guilty by association, because growing up at age 20 months, and he does tell the story with mostly the truth behind it, is that I was at the time North Yarmouth Academy Ice Arena, and at 20 months we put him in a pair of skates, and the only thing that I knew that would fit him properly and give him the support necessary was figure skates. So I did grind off the points, and he does admit, and he understands that the first time he did skate was in figure skates. But really, from that point on, I was all but a few years involved with the ice industry right up to 2001. So his growing up, he grew up in an ice arena, and it was his passion. It wasn't necessarily because his father, was this or that. It was simply the opportunity was there with the different arenas that I was managing, the Civic Center and so forth. So it was all him. I just had the fun of coaching him and a lot of other great kids.
Travis, what do you remember most about growing up and your love? I know you have a true passion for hockey, and one of the things I remember is you talking about one of the biggest things you miss about it is the smell. Maybe you can tell us about your youth. I
got to tell you, it's a real treat to be on here and talking hockey, because so much of my life, the last 25 years, has been devoted to spinal cord injuries, and I'm proud of that, and we'll get there. But it's really fun for me to talk hockey. I don't do it quite as much, especially reminiscing. But I actually think my dad proved. I think that would have been an affirmative response that it was a big part of just having opportunities to be in a rink. But I don't remember that 20 months old and that first time out. But all of my memories at a young age are of either being in a rink. Again, my dad had a little bit of a gap. But and if it wasn't in a rink, it was on the pond. I'm glad that pond hockey has made its way back into mainstream hockey. But I certainly any memory, whether it was in the rink or my dad's affiliation back to the Cumberland County Civic Center, because that was initially the old Maine Mariner days, and it was always fun to just go in and watch the game. And my dad was sort of managing, oversighting security there. But if I get bored, I'd go in the back of the rink where the practice nets were, and I'd just play street hockey while the other game was going on. So lots of good memories from a very early age.
Well, that's great. And I remember, I think the first time that I got to learn about you and your talents was probably when you were in high school, I think, and or maybe a little bit before then, and kept trying to convince your dad that, because I think you were considering going to a U of M, just not the right U of M.
Yeah, right.
And learned about your talents and your hard work. And I've always been impressed by people like you with your talent that you had, where you may not have been the most gifted, but you got you didn't leave anything out. You always put it out on the line, and that's what I think made you the great hockey player that you were. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think that's what drove you to be as great as you were.
I was always small. I hit puberty late. I was always kind of undersized. I was diagnosed with a little bit of dyslexia when I was younger, so I was always kind of one of those underdog. I always felt that I had to work twice as hard to be as good as everybody. And when I finally grew up a little bit and got stronger, then it really started to pay off. But it was, I did want to go to the University of Maine and at Orono, and Sean Walsh was the coach there, and I spent my whole life growing up in Maine in Yarmouth and working at my dad's rink, and that was back in the early '90s when Paul Correa was there, and the Ferraro brothers, and they just won a national championship. Anyways, they were great, but I wanted to see what else was. I wanted to see what else was out there, and having the chance to go down to Boston and be in the city, and kind of really enjoyed getting to know Jack Parker and Mike Boyle, the strength and conditioning coach. Again, I was always trying to get bigger and stronger. But those were the times that that I remember most. Certainly those early days in Maine, and just working my way through, and just I always had this little. I've always been a goal setter, but the thing in the back of my mind was I just wanted to see how good I could be. I wanted to see how fast I could skate. I wanted to see how accurately I could shoot the puck. And that was always sort of the underlying current with my hockey career. And I didn't know if I was going to end after high school, or maybe Division III college, or maybe even Division I, and who knows, maybe after that. But that's what those were the dreams. And as you say, I was always kind of fighting the uphill battle. But it's that chip on your shoulder that that pays off if you stick to it.
Well, it certainly did pay off. And it was interesting. I was doing a little bit of background research, even though I know you on a personal level. Not as much did I know about your career in high school, and that you ended up at Tabor Academy, which I got to visit a couple of years ago, or probably more than a couple of years ago now, when they're in the process of buying a machine. What a beautiful campus. And I'm sure, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but maybe I can ask you if the campus and just the setting is what helped make you decide that that's where you wanted to go.
It was definitely part of it, and but it was also, again, coming from Maine, the way to college hockey in the 90s in New England was more or less through kind of the traditional New England boarding school prep schools. And when I got down to Tabor Academy, it was one of those things where my parents are working hard hours and extra hours and running hockey camps, and so they could afford to send me there. And when I got there, every day, just as you say, it's right on Buzzards Bay, right near Cape Cod, and I just thought, oh, how lucky am I to be here? And I just wanted to make sure I took advantage of the opportunity. And then I sing about those schools, and this is a little bit more philosophical, but I really enjoyed. I always, as much as hockey was always my passion, it drove me. I was always wanting to kind of pride myself on being a more well-rounded kid. I wanted to be more than just a hockey player, and going to New England Prep School gave me that opportunity. I played 3 sports. I participated in some of the other activities. They have a big sailing program, getting on a sailboat on the weekends. But it was a special place for me, and a great school. And really, I've had an opportunity. I do a lot of public speaking, and I've spoken to a lot of the New England Prep schools, and they're all very similar. Just great faculty, a great place to learn, to mature, to develop. Both academically as a person and certainly athletically.
It's one thing that you mentioned there that I'm trying to stress. I've got a nephew who's got a son who is supposed to be a pretty good hockey player. Haven't seen him play yet. He's a peewee. He played up in Quebec at a tournament up there. He played, he's been into Russia. He's gone to Canada, it seemed like every weekend before the COVID situation. And I've been trying to convince him to tell his son to play multiple sports. And I go back to when I was in high school, which was 112 years ago, and Mike Ramsey, who played on the 1980 Olympic team, was a multiple sport player. And Herb Brooks, who I'm a big fan of, a disciple of his coaching, in that telling the people to play multiple sports. And then your dad influences my opinion on things as well, and that he said that if a kid is good enough, no matter where they play, they'll find them. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your opinion and take on whether current situation is too much focus on one sport, or if you think that's okay, or if they should be trying to do multiple sports to expand their capabilities.
I'm a huge believer in certainly the multiple sports, especially through towards high school, and hopefully through high school. I understand if maybe you start to specialize at the end of your high school career, but it's just, I mean, there's so many benefits. One, you have multiple social groups. You get to meet different people. You're not in the same locker room and the same mentality, and I think, if we're being honest, sometimes it can be a little bit of a hockey mentality, and it's refreshing to kind of get outside that circle. I played a lot of soccer. Of course, we know that hockey, you got to be, you have to have the instincts to read and react. And soccer is one of those games early on where you don't kick the ball to the person, you kick it to where the person's going to be, and you learn that on the soccer field, and it very quickly applies to hockey. We always know that was Wayne Gretzky's one of his specialties, and any of the great hockey players. And then the other one is you're just using different muscle groups. To use the same muscle group from age 6 or 7 or whenever you start playing, all the way through to to when your hockey career ends without mixing something else in, just isn't in the best interest of your long-term health and truthfully your long-term hockey career. So I know that it kind of goes against it. One of the things that I think that's changed is, um, the rinks are open year round now, and they're selling ice. The goal is to sell ice, so that means you've got to come up with a different hockey camp, or you've got to come up with a different all-star camp, or you've got to come up with a skills camp, or you've got to come up with power skating, and I'm probably hurting your business. Well, it is what it is now, but it it's it would be nice if they kind of got the kids out of the rinks a little bit more, I think. But I'm probably not helping the world of Zamboni sales by saying that.
That's okay. It is something, and again, I'm going to tap into a Leeism, if we can refer to it as that. Lee, it's what you referred to as checkbook hockey. And I've got a couple of grandkids who my stepson learned about checkbook soccer, that they were all-stars because they could write the check for the soccer. And I've got another stepdaughter who is a big-time soccer player, so I try to keep her in check, Travis. I don't want to let out any secrets that soccer might be good for hockey players, but it is a challenge, and I think that it is something that I think that if kids can play multiple sports, whatever they are, it's going to help, I think, as you said, round them out to be a better person. So
yeah.
maybe we can touch a little bit about when you're making your decision. And I wasn't a very good salesperson to get you convinced enough to go to the University of Minnesota. But I know that you had multiple offers, and I know you made a great choice. But were there any other schools that that really came close to getting you to go there as opposed to BU?
Yeah, there were a few. My dad is a Hall of Famer at University of Vermont, and I had been to a game when I was younger, and my recruiting trip to the old Gutterson Fieldhouse, and it was such an awesome environment, and that was certainly on my list. A guy, a guy by the name of Roger Grillo, was also, ironically, he was my eighth grade life sciences teacher, and he left halfway through the year, and he ended up at Norwich University, and then he ended up at UVM, and he was the assistant coach there. So it was kind of interesting to have my eighth grade teacher recruited me to play at UVM, and that was kind of fun. As I mentioned, I always dreamed of playing at Maine, and in the the mid 90s at Maine, they had some. Sean Walsh was under some investigations. There was a little bit of concern as to where the program stood and what was going to unfold, um, and so that piece, in addition to me realizing I spent most of my life in Maine, and I just wanted to see what else was out there, kind of led me down to Boston. I mentioned I wanted to be a well-rounded person, and when I went on my recruiting trip to BU, um, the guys were just, they loved their hockey. It was great, but they also had some other things. It was also fun to go across town and go watch Northeastern play a preseason game, and I just really enjoyed. There was very much a blue collar feel to the team back then, and they also had a heck of a team. Chris Drury was on that team. Mike Greer was on that team. Jay Pandolfo was on that team. There were a number. Tom Pody would later come in, be on that team. Ricky DiPietro. There were a lot of just really good hockey players. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to see how good I could be, and I knew if I put myself around the best players, it would help me answer that question. So, and then the last thing I'll say, Coach Parker. When I met with him, I felt like he was honest and said, "Here's the deal. We'd love to have you." Um, and there was almost a little bit of remind me a little bit of my dad in some ways, I guess, just because here's the deal, and we'd love to have you, and we think you'll look good in the scarlet and white. And it worked out. I mean, for the most part, certainly that first game, the things didn't, but every other aspect of that, and I think anybody that goes through the recruiting process, and all the coaches more or less told me along the way. I also looked at UNH, and and they said, make sure you find it when you make your decision that you're making it beyond just the hockey program. That if there wasn't hockey, are you still going to like it here? And that was certainly part of my decision. I always assumed that hockey would be there and it's going to keep opening doors, but that was in the back of my mind, and Boston provided me with that opportunity. It was also the best at the time academic school out of the ones I was looking at, aside from Harvard. But I knew that was going to be a challenge to make sure everything worked out to get there. But
Well, that's great. With regards to BU, I have a whole new respect for Jack Parker. Being a Minnesota boy and being a Golden Gopher fan, it was a great rivalry back in the 70s and prior to the 1980 Olympics, with Herb Brooks as a coach. And there was a lot of bad blood, I think, between the University of Minnesota and BU, because of the BU guys trying to beat up the poor little Golden Gophers a couple times.
Yeah, it happened.
And it was very interesting. Another good friend of both of ours, or all three of ours, Eddie Peduto, was kind enough to lend me a book, The Making of a Miracle, by Mike Eruzione, who had his version of what occurred between the Gophers and the Terriers. and somewhere in between, I think, is the truth. But I have to, as a Gopher fan, it's kind of hard. It's kind of like Ed Peduto, being a BC guy. It's kind of hard for him to give credit to anything, but I'm a little softer than he is. And I have all the respect in the world for Mr. Parker, and I know how much time he's taken and spent by your side. Maybe you can give us a little bit deeper look into him as a coach and him as a person.
I'd be happy to, because he's definitely a special person in my life. One of my first, I was definitely a little intimidated. I liked him. I was excited to play for him. I was certainly intimidated, I think, as any freshman is when you come into a big Division I program like that. And I was a little slow in picking up some things. I remember one of our first practices, we had been working on the breakout, and we had 3 different breakouts, and I didn't quite know as well as I should. And he dumped the puck in, and we broke it out, and I screwed it up, and he blew his whistle and kind of said, "Come on, Trav, let's get this." He dumped it in. I screwed it up again, and finally he came over. He said, "Travis," he said, "which breakout do you know?" And I said, I told him which one. He said, "All right, I guess we'll go with that one, Travis." But the thing that always impressed me, and he was at the hospital, that night, and most nights afterwards, and during that, and I was in the intensive care unit, and over 2 months there, and he made it a regular visit. And then the big one for me was when I got back to Boston University after my accident. I made the decision. I had 6 months of rehab. I had about 4 months of being at home in Maine and trying to figure out this new body and care attendants and just the medical pieces, and I just knew that the one thing my dad always said was my academics would take me further in life than anything else. I was hell bent on trying to prove him wrong. But turns out that the academics were going to play a big role. So when I got back to BU, it was hard because I didn't. Again, I was trying to figure out who I was and how I fit in. I'd only been at BU for about a month and a half, that first sort of freshman year before my accident. And when I came back, there was just, I think everybody has that assumption that I would just, kind of gel right back in with the team, and I was a hockey player, and it would all go naturally. And turns out it didn't quite work that way. When you play a college sport, certainly Division I sport, it's really a full-time job. And then you've got the academic piece, which is another full-time job. So I found that when I wasn't in the locker room every day, if I wasn't on the bus going to the games, if I wasn't in line doing the drills, I just felt like I was missing out on everything. And I was always trying to like connect the dots and figure out who was dating who, or what Coach Parker was mad at this player for. And eventually I realized that it really wasn't, I just needed to let it go. And I still went to all the home games and whatnot. So I wasn't as close to the hockey team as I as maybe I would have thought. At the same time, we can get into that later, but it's also really hard to be around it because to go down that locker room and to be at the games and to see my dream unfold every time I rolled into that rink and to not be a part of it, which really made it a nightmare. But the thing that did happen, going back to your comment, was Coach Parker. He would check in on me regularly. He lived 2 doors down from my dorm in a brownstone, and he would come and chat, and he'd give me updates on what was going on with the team and who wasn't getting the job done, and he'd actually even bounce some things off of me. And one of the things that I always appreciated, I appreciated that he would be so open with me and tell me as much as he did, just about the team and the guys. But one of the other things that was going on, there were a couple different times where the Bruins inquired about him as the coach, and I forget if it was my sophomore or junior year, but they put a pretty hard press on him to go coach for the Bruins, and he spent a couple nights in my dorm room just thinking it through and trying to figure it out. And I said, well, I said, Coach, what's the goaltending situation? And different questions. He's like, you do know what you're talking about, Josh. You're always going to build from the goalie out. And so again, I was young, but I appreciated that he listened to my thoughts and opinions, and it's been that way ever since. Instead of he's also a big movie buff, so we would do dinner. He'd come grab me. We'd get dinner. We'd go to a movie in the middle of the season, and before and after I graduated from BU, I ended up living right outside of Kilmore Square and still close by, and we continue to do dinners and movies, and um, it's special. He's the thing that I don't think people realize is just I mean, people probably understand he's smart, but he's smarter than you realize. He's also just wise, and his wisdom was what always um, I always paid close attention to that to turn down the Bruins job on a couple of occasions and some other opportunities, and he always kind of thought it through and maybe didn't do what people would have expected him to do. Just like retiring, he could still be coaching. He could be with Jerry York, sort of neck and neck on the all-time win list. But that's not what it was about. It wasn't about setting any records. It was about putting in the effort and being competitive and competing and being the best while he was there, but also realizing that there's more to life. So
Well, I got from this book, and I get from listening to you, that I think, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, he is making a difference in the lives of many, and that struck home so much. I don't know if you've read the book by Mike Eruzione or not, but if you haven't, I would suggest it. And
I I do have it, and I haven't, but that was the other thing I'll say. What did he have? Like 450 sons, basically. He had two daughters. He had two daughters, and 450 sons, and I think I had an opportunity to almost be as close as any of them, which was special.
yeah, and that's what Mike talked about, was that Jack really helped mold him, and I can hear it in you. I see it in you, and I think with him, he maybe could have gone on and did other things, and been very successful at it. I don't doubt that, but I think he knew what was important, and he did things. And I look at your situation, and I think I've discussed this with you, and I know I've discussed it with your parents. It's very unfortunate, the accident that happened, but I think that you have changed so many lives in um, what you've done with the Travis Roy Foundation. And that's not to say that you couldn't have done that if the accident didn't happen, but I just think what you've done is so incredible. And I think that a lot of people owe you many thanks for the burden that you've had to bear to make other people's lives better. So
Thank you, Doug. And it means a lot coming from you. And again, we've gotten to know each other pretty good over the years. But it's yeah. I mean, I always wanted to be the uh, uh, you dream of being in the NHL and having a stage where you can do things beyond hockey and go to the children's hospitals and I was, that part of me, that was part of the dream, was I wanted to, be the NHL player, but also to be involved in the community and the efforts to make people's lives a little bit better. And this, worked out very different. But I knew early on that there was an opportunity there. There was a little bit of a spotlight just because of the way the story became so public and the attention that it received. And I was also injured about 6 months after Christopher Reeve, and he was sort of one of my role models, and seeing how him do what he did, especially being on a ventilator. And I thought, well, maybe I can do it in a smaller way in Boston and New England. And uh, it's certainly given my life purpose. And that was, there were two things. I wanted to make sure my life had purpose, and I also just want to be a productive part of society. And the foundation has allowed me to do that. Getting my degree at BU kind of made some opportunities more available, or for me to do the work we're doing. And it's uh, again, to have purpose, to be able to touch people's lives the way we have. But one of the big, because here we are with the hockey background, the hockey family, the hockey community, um, is such a massive part of the success of my story personally, and very much the success of the Travis Wright Foundation. I mean, if you're going to go through a tragedy of something similar to what my family and I have gone through, um, there's there's no better support system than the hockey community. Again, early on, my dad knows the stories better than me, but whether it's Wayne Gretzky coming to my hospital room, or all of the envelopes from little mite players across the country that had seen it on the news and raised a few dollars and mailed it in. Or I literally just got an email from our director at the foundation this week with a photo of a hockey stick. And I'm sorry, I sent somebody was up in Maine and was at I don't know if it was a junkyard or wherever it was, but a bunch of old hockey sticks. And there was one hockey stick that had TR and BU on it, and they sent an email asking if it was maybe mine and maybe it was something I wanted to have back. And I thought, well, there's a few sticks that are missing, but it would be cool to find it. But back in my mind, I thought, I bet it was some just young hockey player that was taking me out on the ice with him. And it was just that, it's just at the 24 and my name and BU, and that's, again, from the early days to today. The hockey community continues to support this story and make it as successful as it's been.
Well, I don't know how much you want to talk about that. I'm open to whatever you do. I will tell you, we're coming up. You know it better than I do. Obviously, it's coming up on 25 years, which is hard to believe. I'll share a little bit about my first, and it's emotional for me because I know your family so well, and know what you've had to go through to a much smaller degree than some others do. But I can remember it's burned in my brain of riding my bike down. I was living in my old house over in Lakewood, and riding my bicycle down to the liquor store to get a newspaper, as I would typically do on a Saturday morning. And on the front page of the LA Times, now we have to set the stage that 25 years ago, hockey wasn't in California what it is today. And on the front page of the LA Times was a story about your accident. And I pedaled myself as fast as my fat body would pedal back then to get back home and call Ed Peduto to find out what happened. And it was a challenge for me to grasp it. Your book that I want to touch on, called 11 Seconds, that took me probably 10 years before I could read it, because it was just too close to me to read that, because it made it real. And it just is something that the hockey community, as you talked about, came together. It's been great. again, I am sorry you've had to go through what you've had to go through, but it's your efforts haven't gone unnoticed and unwarranted. They're just, and that's probably not the right word. What you've accomplished is amazing, and I just want to thank you for that, for everything that you've done.
Well, it's, as I say, it's been a ride. I never thought it could be as good as it is. I'm not saying that everything's hunky dory and there aren't hard days, but again, I realize I'm sort of the poster, the name on the front of this story, but it's there's so many people that have played leading roles and again made it as successful as it is. And the other thing, what I take a little bit of pride and some relief in is I again 25 years I've seen the stories of Jack Jablonski and Dana Lang and I wish it would we had a better therapy and treatment and to make the outcomes better for these families that are going through it. But really the progress has been immense, but it hasn't gotten to the clinical stage yet where humans are regaining function like we all hope. But I just know how the hockey community has surrounded other stories, and it's incredible. Again, what they've done with the Believe Foundation in Minnesota, and Dan, and I know there's many other players, unfortunately, but there's always been that support for them as well. And so my story isn't all that unique. There's a lot of other people that have held up the torch and trying to help get to a better day for those dealing with paralysis, and hopefully we'll get there.
Great. Do you want to talk a little bit about the book, Trav? I know that's been
Sure.
a long time since it got published, but maybe the highlights of it and where people can get that if they want to read about it.
Yeah. So 11 seconds was reflective of the 11 seconds that I played hockey at Boston University, my very first shift. And 11 seconds later, they blew the whistle, and that was it. But I certainly never thought I'd write a book, that's for sure. And it's a little bit of a neat story. Shortly after my accident that winter, Ed Swift, a senior writer at Sports Illustrated, did a large feature article in Sports Illustrated, and spent some time with my dad up in Maine, and really got to know the family pretty well. And once we decided that there was going to be an opportunity to do a book, we knew we had the right author because he was a college goalie. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dad. Princeton, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he was a college goalie at Princeton, and certainly knows the rinks and the history and hockey was in his DNA too. So it was nice to work with an author that knew the game and understood the hockey family, and it was interesting. I wrote that book my freshman year while I was at BU, and he was my ghostwriter, and he'd come in a couple times a week or once a week for 2, 3, 4 months, and he would just ask me, tell me about your dad, or tell me about your mom, or what's your first memories of hockey, and tell me about the moment of your accident in that day. And I would just tell the stories, and I feel it's cliche to say it was cathartic, but it really was for me. I probably got as much therapy in writing that book and talking with Ed as anything. But I was also a little slow. I never wasn't until I got the first draft when I realized, oh my gosh, this is going to be a book, and I pretty much poured my heart and soul into it, and maybe shared more than I intended. But I also think it's what's made the book as good as it is, or has done as well as it's done. And I didn't know if it was going to be something that I regretted or something that I'd be proud of. And it's nice to know that 25 years later, or really even a year later, I was very proud of it. And it's been neat to see it used in schools across this country as required reading. And it's still, you're never going to get rich writing a book. I know that, but I still get a royalty check for a few $100 every twice a year, and it was a fun process. It was neat to do. It was also actually brought me out your way in Minnesota because for my book tour I went out for the state championship, and they had the expo there, in addition to the tournament weekend, and what an experience that is to be in that. What was it back then? What was the name of the rink?
The St. Paul
Right.
Civic Center, probably.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it was so cool to see high school hockey with 17,000 fans there. So
Yeah,
thank you for asking that book.
it's not what the Minnesota State high school hockey tournament's not what it used to be when I was young, but I don't know if there's anything that is like what it used to be. And back when 100 years ago, when I was young, they had only one division. Now they've got two. And as a matter of fact, I talked with a gentleman who I'm hoping to be able to do a podcast with, John Mayasich, who played on the 1956 and 60 Olympic teams, along with some guys from the East Coast. But most of the guys that did a lot of the work and were the reason for their success were Minnesota boys, just like the 80 team.
Yeah.
Tongue in cheek, but I think he still holds some records. He played out of a little town called Eveleth, where the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame is, and it was special for me. I got to meet him for the first time last fall, and I'm looking forward to being able to do a podcast with him, and hopefully we get one of the Cleary brothers on as well to talk about the 60 team. But yeah, it's that is an interesting experience. Let's maybe branch into the foundation now and talk about your foundation that you created, the Travis Roy Foundation, and what it's done from its when it first began and where it is today.
The foundation came to be. I was literally still in the hospital, in Boston, and it came out after my accident. There was so much goodwill, so many letters that came in support of myself and my family, and there were fruit baskets, and there were teddy bears, and there were flowers, and it got to be so almost overwhelming. And my parents and my uh, cousins, they would take the extra fruit baskets and flowers, and they deliver them all around the hospital to share with other people that didn't have the support of families nearby. And one of the early days, I was down on the rehab floor, and doing my range of motion, and there was a mother of one of the other spinal cord injured survivors there, and uh, she was in the rehab room and the gym, and she had a nervous breakdown right there in front of everybody, and she was just in tears, and it was a little scary, and it was also everybody was sort of wondering, what's going on and what happened, and it finally started to trickle out that she had just gotten off the phone with the insurance company, and they were not going to provide the medical bed. They weren't going to cover it, and she just wanted to bring her son home, and they had already, I would say, spent the money they had to cover some of this, and it's such a burden, short term and long term, this injury financially. And I just remember thinking that um, just my heart broke for him, but at the same time, it turned out I had really good insurance. I had the NCAA catastrophic insurance policy was in place. My mother was an educator and had a great policy. There was money that was raised for me, and it became clear that it wasn't going to be perfect for me, but I was going to be a lot better off than most people going through this. And I thought, well, maybe we can raise some money to do two things. One was I also wanted to get the hell out of this wheelchair. I wanted a cure. I was right there on Christopher Reeve's, heels. Research. We'll bring this to an end in 5 years. But I also knew people needed relief immediately, and so we started the foundation. Half the money we raise goes towards research, and we've provided several $1 million over the years to top researchers around the country, and we're getting closer. But maybe the thing that I'm almost as proud, if not more proud of, is the adaptive equipment grants that we have given out over the years, and we purchase wheelchairs, and we purchase medical beds, and we purchase lifts to get up the either into the front door or up to the second floor, and driving modifications. it's incredible what people can do these days with a disability if they just have the right equipment. And unfortunately, 90 something percent of our applicants are all on Social Security disability. They have no real additional money to make upgrades to their equipment. And it's a big challenge. So we provide those grants. We give out about between $30,000 and $40,000. We used to be up to $60,000, $70,000 before the pandemic, but and we help out usually 10, 15, maybe 20 applicants a month. And one of my favorite stories is we gave a grant to a gentleman living in the South, and he had three daughters, and he just wanted a lift so that he could get up to the second floor and tuck in his girls, and he wrote a letter, a thank you letter, and he said, I just want you to know on the ride up, on the lift that we help purchase, he said, on the ride up I thank God, and on the ride down I thank the Travis Roy Foundation. So it's just little stories like that where we've really been able to change lives. And if you go to the Travis Roy Foundation.org website and you go to our YouTube page, we've got a lot of neat profile videos on individuals that we've impacted. And when you give a grant, it's not just that person, your life you're changing. You're changing the parents, you're changing the care tenants, so they're not having to hurt their back because now they have the right lift to get their loved one in and out of the bed. Um, and and there's just no breaks when it comes to paralysis. It just goes on and on. So the foundation has been a great, as I say, a big piece of my life. And it's also, I also get to see the best of humanity every day because we don't get big grants from big foundations or institutes or corporations. All of our money is primarily raised through through events, mostly through athletic events. We do a charity hockey challenge at Madison Square Garden in New York. We don't have a date yet, obviously, with everything that's going on, but we hope to hold that next winter. We do one at the United Center in Chicago. We do our annual Bean Pot Charity Challenge, and it's basically just guys in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s and 60s, and we get to go to these famed arenas and play a pickup hockey game, and then give them a nice gift and a nice uniform, and then we come back later that night and watch the home team take on whoever they're playing. But so the Blackhawks have been great, the Rangers, and certainly the Bean Pot Tournament. So last year I think it raised nearly $750,000, which has been great. And then of course we got Wiffle Ball.
Well, it's on my bucket list to do whatever I can to help out the Travis Roy Foundation. And it's something that hopefully you won't be able to say, well, we aren't getting big corporate sponsorship. One of these days, you never can tell who you bump into. I spread the story around as much as I can, and hopefully one day it'll fall on the right ears and it'll be that big pot of gold for you. But you guys are doing amazing work, and as I tell people, no donation is too small or too big for what you do to help people out. And speaking of that, and then we can get into the Wiffle Ball Tournament, because we know that was supposed to take place this weekend, but unfortunately the world we're living in today has changed everything. Can you tell us what people can do to help your foundation? How do they go about making donations? What other things can they do to help the Travis Roy Foundation out?
Sure. So right now, this is our Wiffle Ball weekend, and we've kind of have a week-long campaign going, mostly virtual. We do have an online silent auction. If you go to the website and click on the Wiffle Ball weekend, you'll find a link to our online silent auction. We've got some great things, including our remote control Zamboni. Thanks to Zamboni. Thank you. Remote control cooler Zamboni model, I guess I should say, which is fantastic. And then the other thing, people are having a lot of fun helping us spread awareness and also raising some money. But we have the TRF Wiffle Ball Challenge, and we're asking people to record quick, 30, 60-second videos with a wiffle ball and bat. It does have to be an authentic wiffle ball and bat because we use wiffle in our title, and how the trademark branding people are. And we share the videos, and we ask people, to record a quick video hitting a wiffle ball over some unique landmark or just getting creative with a wiffle ball and bat. and maybe tag one or two or three other people to take on the challenge or to make a donation. And it's similar to the ice bucket challenge or some of these other kind of gimmicky things we've seen, but there's a lot of heavy things, heavy topics in our country, whether it's the racial injustice, whether it's the pandemic, and this is just an opportunity to do something fun in your backyard with your family and or just by yourself, and record a video, post it, and help make us put a smile on those of us that get to watch them. I will say the Hockey East coaches in particular have been fantastic. I think pretty much every one of them has posted a video. A lot of hockey players across the country. We need a few more of the Midwestern colleges and players to get involved, and of course of the West Coast. Um, it's TRF, sorry, hashtag batter up TRF. Go online, check them out. Any of the social media platforms, people can post their videos too, and they're pretty entertaining.
Well,
it goes through August, the end of August, even though the tournament, by the time people hear this, the tournament sort of will be over, but the batter up TFR will continue throughout the month of August, if I'm correct on that, Trav.
Yep, exactly. We actually have a neat. We've got 3 categories of prizes too, whether it's the biggest whiff video or most creative landmark or the best overall video, and we're gonna have 10 winners, and the Red Sox have been great. We're gonna take them to Fenway Park. We're gonna get down in left field, and then people are gonna have an opportunity to try to hit a wiffle ball over the real green monster. So there's some cool prizes if you post your videos, and again, hashtag batter up TRF.
That's awesome. And we had our attempt at that today. I'm going to point that out to people. If you go to any of the Zamboni social media stuff, which that falls into the younger crowd, it's not something that I'm an expert at, but I had visions of us lining up some machines a la Evel Knievel. And again, as an old person, your father and I know who Evel Knievel is, and try to hit the wiffle ball over the row of Zamboni machines in an effort to bring attention to your organization and raising money, which is this raising the money is about helping change people's lives. And it's a great thing for anybody that's out there. If you hear this after the month of August, that doesn't mean you can't still donate to the foundation to help them help others. So you talked a little bit, Travis, about the fields, and maybe between you and your dad, you can let us know about them and where they're located. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go visit. It was incredible. What an incredible weekend. And I know you have like a hashtag for that weekend too. So fill us in about the fields.
Sure. The best weekend of the year is what we call it. And it really is. We've got 32 teams that come from all across the country. And wiffle ball is the cause, but there's I think everybody would be lying if they didn't say that people get excited about visiting the Little Fenway in Essex, Vermont. Ironically, Pat O'Connor, he read my book 11 Seconds 20 years ago, and he got done reading, and he thought he had just finished building this replica Fenway Park in his backyard. He thought maybe we could do a fundraiser, and so we bid on it, and we had 7 teams, and it rained, cats and dogs. We raised $2,500, and never had we ever had more fun raising money. And it's grown over the years. Now we've got the little Wrigley Field. We've got the little Field of Dreams with the corn in the outfield. And last year we raised just under $800,000 for a total of nearly over $6 million. So to think that we're raising that kind of money in a cow field in Essex, Vermont, it's more than a cow field, certainly, but again, I said it earlier on, I get to see the best of humanity. There's so much good out there, and I know everybody's dealing with some extra anxiety and stress these days, but there's so much good out there, and the tournament has been a big part of that. And my dad sort of become he used to manage ice arenas, now he's the caretaker, and one of the caretakers of Little Fenway, so he's got a few stories probably too.
Oh, it's just, I think for people listening that they can go to the Travis Roy Foundation. And Trav, I don't know how many videos, at least 2 or 3 that the drone one is really good, where it stands up as it goes up and so forth. But the Mullaney family, which are the inventors of wiffle ball out of Connecticut, they say that they're in touch with, the hundreds of thousands of teams that play throughout the world. And the facility that we have in Essex, Vermont, is the only one like it. There are other facilities that have one field, two fields, but he says there's only one place that has three fields that are replicas, and truly replicas in the sense that Pat O'Connor, when they built Little Wrigley, he actually went out to Chicago to the Cubs because he was a big fan, and they gave him a sprig of ivy and dirt from the infield to take back. And to this day, the ivy has grown and spread. We had to add to it and so forth. But that original sprig is still sprouts every spring and goes throughout. And the sand is still mixed in with what we have there. So, if you'd like to see it, just go to the Travis Roy Foundation and pull up one of the videos that give you a chance to see three exact replicas of three iconic fields, certainly.
Lee, what are the dimensions? Because I've been trying to explain to people and to the wonderful guys that were given the wiffle ball a whack at our plant in Canada. What are the dims to clear, like the left field wall at Little Fenway and Little Wrigley? What is it to get it out to the bleachers?
About 95 feet, Trav. Is that? I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously, when you make replicas, you put the footage that's on the actual field. So when you look out at the green monster, it says whatever it is supposed to be at Fenway Park. And it makes me think that, for those that are Red Sox fans, they know the pesky pole, which is in right field. We were very fortunate when John Pesky was still alive. He came up to the tournament, and of course, one of the traditions at Fenway Park is to sign the Fenway Pesky pole, and so we actually got John to sign the Pesky pole at Little Fenway. So, anyways, getting back to your question, Trav, I want to say approximately 95 feet to left field, and pretty much the same to right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And there's also literally a website devoted to the fields. It hasn't been updated a little bit, but littlefenway.com, and I believe the dimensions and a lot of the story of the fields are right there. And if you're really a diehard, you can go to Homerun Pat at gmail.com, and Pat is the encyclopedia of all things wiffle around this country beyond what the Fenway, the Wiffle Company has. So he's always keeping abreast at all the different replica fields around the country based for wiffle ball.
And we're fortunate, Doug, that when he first built Little Fenway for his kids, who were all hockey players, and that's the connection there, plus the hockey committee, the wiffle ball committee, I think 90% of them had kids that played hockey, and that's why they've been involved for years and years. But the whole concept, was Pat, and he drew it out on a napkin and got volunteers to build it. And then the same is true with the Field of Dreams and Little Wrigley. It was all volunteers. Everything that you see there just about was donated. And to bring another hockey name in, and more recent, is the name Pelkey, which in Vermont is recognized. And if you follow the USA hockey women's team, Amanda Pelkey was on the gold medal winning team, and her father, John, has a lot to do with the granite industry in Barrie, Vermont. And John brought up about 800 pieces of granite that would have been headstones at Arlington National, and got those donated to help us build Field of Dreams. And John really almost single-handedly built Field of Dreams. So, it's just there's so many different connections in everything that goes on out those fields. And of course, to get there, you go across a one-lane bridge, and then you get off the tarred road, and you drive for 1.25 miles on a dirt road, and all of a sudden you come and there's Fenway Park, you know, Little Wrigley and Field of Dreams. It just blows everybody's mind that this place exists really on the earth, and to get there, you have to know where you're going.
But it was an amazing adventure for me a couple of years ago to come up and experience it. And again, I thank you and your family for that opportunity. It's something anybody who's listening, and I wish I had 2 million followers that were listening to this, that I could say go out and visit. Don't want to bite off more than you guys can chew up there, but it's certainly something that you can go. And the food trucks that were there were amazing. Just watching it, and then for me to see, I think it was the first year one of your family members won, and what was what was interesting was the game. They were ahead in the game, and then they were playing a New York team, and it was like Bucky Fleepin' Dent all over again when a guy hit a home run. And I'm like, am I going to have to watch the Yankees beat another team? It's not bad enough that they beat the Minnesota Twins all the time, but am I going to have to watch this? And fortunately, I think it was one of your nephews that won with the home run into the net in extra innings.
Yep.
So
that
was spectacular.
Staten Island Yankees versus the Blue Bulls, and it took the Blue Bulls 14 years. They started when they were, Trav, 8th and 9th graders, put that team together somewhere around there, and now they've all got families and kids, and it took them 14 years to win their first championship. The Staten Island Yankees, I want to say, have won 3. So that was an exciting weekend for you to be there. And of course, for those that, you know, I know you came up here on business, Doug, that there were numerous times that you had to leave to go talk and sell Zambonis to people in Vermont. So I don't want Richard thinking you were, you know, slacking off during that visit.
Oh, no. There was, as a matter of fact, Essex Junction was right on the list of people that I stopped on the way up and on the way back. But it was a love of labor for me to give up my weekend to go visit that for the first time, because you guys had asked me to come up so many times, and I was just happy that I was able to finally do so. And maybe you can expand a little bit. I've tried to explain to people, and they don't quite understand, and maybe there aren't the people who are true wiffle ball fans. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are so attentive to the trademark, and that's what I explained to our people. You know, we're telling everybody all the time about the Zamboni trademark, that wiffle is the official. There's only one wiffle, and it's important that that's the product that gets used. But tell us about the pitchers maybe a little bit, because there was a guy from New York that looked like a left-hander that could throw all day long, and then there's a tall, lanky kid that was striking out 95% of the people that came to the bat.
All world. They refer to Billy Doyle of the Boston Beef, who won the championship 3 times. He's known as all world. He probably has 12 different pitches. What's the Yankees? Trav, I watched last night. The pitcher.
Joey Tyrone. Joey Tyrone from Staten Island. He's 70-something years old, and he's got a dozen pitches as well. And it's interesting though, because we do have a speed limit. We try to keep the speeds down, so you got to really know how to make that ball move and throw a lot of junk to be successful. And the new teams that come up, it's a steep learning curve to catch up with the veterans and the craft that people have put into throwing a wiffle ball.
I mean, in the major league, you see a pitcher's got 3 or 4 pitches and he's a success. If you can't throw at least 10 different pitches and control them, you're not going to be successful at the Travis Roy Foundation Wiffle Ball Tournament, no matter how good your team is.
Lee, could you also maybe expand, or Travis, on the teams that had come up there? I was absolutely amazed that there was one, was it from Alabama, that had come all the way up there? So of the teams that you get from around the country, I don't know if it's around the world or not, but maybe let us know where some of those teams have come from.
The teams initially, again, it was very much a Vermont centric, and then we started to grow the amount of teams that could play as we added fields, and teams started coming from new places. But we've most of them are from the Northeast. We had a team from Georgia last year. We have the team from Alabama that came. We had a team from Hawaii that was trying to figure it out and make it work, and it fell through at the last minute. But what's interesting, again, doing something for 20 years, and people have been so loyal to our event, that a number of the players have flown the coop, so to say. But they all come back for Wiffle Ball weekend, and we have people, several from California and around the country. We had one guy on the Boston Beef that quit his job. He was in India, I think, and it just wasn't liking it. And Wiffle Ball tournament was coming up. He said, "I'm out of here. I'm done." Quit his job and flew back just in time to be back at the fields for the Wiffle Ball tournament. So it's a pretty devoted group of people, and it's one of those things. Once you see it, once you participate, you're hooked. Once the hook is set, you're not getting off, and it's fun to be a part of something that people enjoy that much and want to come back to every year.
And the other side of it, Doug, going back 20 years ago, 19 or whichever way you want to look at it, of the 7 teams that played on that pouring rainy day, of the 7 teams, 4 still play every year. So
well, a lot of them are grandkids or second generation.
Yeah. So it's really neat, to think that the people are that dedicated, to the whole thing, because it's more than just wiffle ball. There's so much going on out there throughout that weekend that it was like one of the vendors you talked about, the food, and we have a food court for those that aren't familiar with it, and we have 6 or 7 vendors that come out, and I want to say every one of those vendors, when the weekend's over, turn most of their profits into the foundation.
Yeah,
yesterday, was it yesterday, day before, Trav, one of the vendors called up and said, "Hey, Lee, you're going to be home tomorrow. I want to bring you up something." And I said, "Great." He knows I love cotton candy. He makes cotton candy, and at the end of the tournament, he always gives me 2 or 3 bags to take home. And he came out, and that's what he does for a living, is he goes from fairs to fairs and events and so forth. And of course, with COVID, it's been a tough year for him. But he came out and brought me my cotton candy, and then he made a significant donation.
Well, I know it's an emotional thing for you as it is for me. It's something that, again, I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to experience it, because it is incredible, and it's amazing, the camaraderie, even between the Yankee fans and the Red Sox fans, what goes on up there. The other thing,
the only thing, Doug, is always the second weekend in August. So if people ever think about coming up, just plan on the second week of August, the weekend of August, we'll be playing.
And there's multiple levels. That's what I remember. And you mentioned about grandkids now being participants in this. I remember going up there and seeing you coaching all the grandkids that were there. And your granddaughter, is it Olivia, I think, that swung the bat one-handed and was able to hit the ball into the cornfield. So it's amazing. It's not just for the foundation, which obviously is the #1 goal, but it's the event. It's an event, and it's really something people ought to put on their bucket list.
Yeah, we'd love to have as many as we can get up there and experience it and see it and enjoy it and have the fun that we do. And it's like a reunion every year for all the people that have participated over the 19 years. So a lot of fun.
That's great. I want to touch a little bit on your mom, Lee, Lois. What a and Trav's grandma. What a spectacular lady. I will never forget. It goes back many moons when there was some drama going on in my life, and you and I were in Vegas, and you were going to rent a car and drive to visit your mom in Sedona. And I said, well, if you don't mind letting me drive you, I'll be happy if I can tag along with you. And I can remember going and seeing the Phoenix Symphony play at an amphitheater in Sedona, and the colors are etched in my mind. And I wasn't on any kind of mind-altering drugs, but maybe touch a little bit on your mom, because she was a truly special lady to me and my now wife, as well as to your family. Can you share a little bit of a couple stories about Lois?
Well, Mom was born in 1917, and is that my phone going off? Yours, Trav.
No.
Are you hearing that noise?
No.
Okay. My mother was born in 1917, and she just died 2 months ago. So she was 102 years old, which is quite an accomplishment in anybody's life that way. But she took a lot of grief because Travis became her pride and joy. And so after the accident, she always referred to him as her P&J. And but she loved sports. She loved the Bruins. And even at age 102, she was so disappointed when the season ended that I think that was one of the things that got her upset with the COVID. It ruined that. But she enjoyed life. She lived by the saying that she would rather rust. She didn't want to rust out. She'd rather wear out than rust out. And then the last thing I'll share is when we celebrated her 100th birthday, she said probably about 3 or 4 months afterwards, we had a big party in Massachusetts for her, the assisted living home she was at. She said about 5 or 6 months afterwards, she looked at me dead in the eye and she said, you know, after my 100th, it's been all downhill. And I thought, you know, if she could say that she's lived, 100 years of full life, active life, God bless her soul. And it took COVID to kill her, because we were convinced she was going to live, my wife said 105. But anyways, she was a one of a kind, I guess.
She was. And I've got a couple stories of when I visited her in, was it Wayland or Waveland that she was in at the end. I went and sat down at a table with her and 2 other ladies that were that were there, and it was an interesting experience. And I think I was waiting for Lois to come down to the table, and was talking to the 2 ladies, and was telling them, I met Lois in Sedona, Arizona, and she was driving a red Mustang convertible. And the 2 ladies' eyes lit up like silver dollars, and it was just so funny. They're like going, Lois had a convertible? I go, yeah. I said, she's quite the lady. And then when she was in a senior home in Sedona, and going over there and visiting her, and she only lasted there for a little while, and her comment was, I'm not old enough to be here.
Well, that was the thing. She said when she called me up, she said, you're not going to be happy with me, because my mother and I had a very close relationship. My sister had already died. But anyway, she said, you're not going to be happy with my decision. She said, but I just can't stand it here. She said, everybody here is old. And she was 88 years old at the time. And she said everybody was old. And she did. She moved out. She got in a house and moved in there and lived for another 5 years. before she finally, at age 90, 2 years later, excuse me, at age 90, let's see, yeah, 90, she left Sedona, lived with my brother until he died in 95. No, it was later than that. But anyway, he died, so then I was the only one left. And for the last 5 years of her life, she'd gone through 2 husbands and buried 2 of her children. And I told her, and Travis will verify this because he was there when I told her a number of times that, Mom, if you outlive me, I'm really going to be pissed at you. And she laughed and said, well, I hope it doesn't happen. So anyways, thank you for, Mom was special, and I'm glad that you and Vanjie got to know her, and we all enjoyed it, that's for sure.
She was an incredible lady who loved you, Travis, as well as your siblings, and just a very special lady who touched a lot of people's lives. And when Lee and I were in Sedona that first time I met her, she had younger friends than either Lee and I were that wanted to know who we were and what was going on. And I will never for the life of me forget when Vanjie and I went to Sedona. It's about 4 years ago now, because the gentleman who was my best man, who's a very big part of my life, we went to Sedona the year he died, and that was in February. And we went to the thrift shop that your mom worked at. And I go, this is a place I picked up a friend of mine. Her name was Lois. Do you know? Oh, do you know Lois? The people that were working there still knew who she was and still wanted to know what was going on. And it was something else. So a very special lady who I thank both of you for sharing with me. We've exceeded the time that I've asked of you guys. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about today about the Travis Roy Foundation? Or Travis, we can get into a little puck if you want.
No, I think we're good. You're a lot of great stories, and I will say that too quick. I got to tie it back into the Zamboni piece though, because I always remember it was such a big deal when you'd see somebody, a coach, holding off to the back of a Zamboni while somebody was driving it around, and I always dreamed of that day of being able to like hold on to the Zamboni and get pulled by the Zamboni. And my dad took over managing the rink at NYA again. That was one of my first things, and then I finally got up in the seat. I was 14 years old, and I started with a skate sharpener, and then had about 6 years driving the Zamboni. I think even the new electric one when it first came out. But it's always been fun to have the ties to Zamboni and the family, and of course to you, Doug.
Well, your family has been awesome to the Zamboni Company. We appreciate all the recognition that we've got through you guys. We appreciate your help. Frank appreciates the help of getting his bus started when you had that. And he can tell you exactly how many miles it goes on a tank of gas from Brantford to the parking lot of North Yarmouth Academy.
And that's as far as it will go. There was no more diesel fuel when you make that trip. That was a memorable, one of the many memorable experiences with the Zamboni family that I've had, Doug. So it's just been a part of my life and part of Travis's. And I don't know, I know your trivia stuff. So I don't know, Doug, is 14? Do you know anybody younger than that?
I'm sure. There had to have been younger. You would have had me on there earlier if you'd been working at that rink sooner. So I'd hate to know what the youngest age is.
Well, knowing your father the way I do, Travis, he probably had you driving at 14 because you were free help.
Yeah. He always knew how to save money, Doug.
He's one of those thrifty guys where when he was painting his ice, he would always go rent a pump and then bring it back after the paint was clogged up the pump and it had stopped pumping the paint, and go, I don't know what happened to this thing or why it stopped working. And then the next year he'd come back and get another one to do the same trick. So no, you guys have been great, and you both mean an awful lot to the Zamboni family. I know that Richard and Alice, I just was lucky enough to spend a couple hours with them a few weeks ago. they said to send you their best, and thank you very much for your hospitality today. And we want to thank everyone for listening into another episode of Ask the Zamboni Expert podcast. Have a question for one of our experts or an idea for a future episode? Please email your questions or requests to info@zamboni.com. For more info and additional podcast episodes, please visit zamboni.com/podcast or search Ask the Zamboni Experts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. This is Doug Peters wishing you an iced day.